rolling? Yes. We're rolling. We're on the Magic Box Talk Show. Woo! Yeah! And, cut it out! See, all the YouTube, I can watch on the YouTube and see the graph of how far along people, and everybody's going to drop off because we clapped for too long. And their attention span just went like whoosh out the window.
In here right now. There's a lot of people.
It's true. It's true. This massive mob that we have that's come to see the show. So we're here at the Fun City Store, which is where I buy all my toilet paper. Thank you very much. You can get good toilet paper here. You can get a lot of other things, such as steering wheel covers, or keychains, or
tools,
or hats. There's lots of hats,
tools,
and clappers, and sunglasses, and purses, and American flags, and sombreros. There's that, which goes under the category of hat, but it's a special hat, a sombrero. So I'm here with Ray, and Ray, you have a background in engineering, and I think I want to have this explained. We were talking about this before. You were telling me that there's a potential now to use capacitors as batteries. So how does this work? Assuming that the viewer out there in YouTube land knows like absolutely zero about electronics. What do you mean by this, using a capacitor as a battery?
Well, I've known about capacitors all my life, and I used to wonder about them until I come to realize that the batteries that we're putting energy in, like right now my solar system is feeding a battery, a couple of them on the ground there, and they're heavy.
Right.
I come down here this morning to try to retrieve a battery the guy borrowed and never returned, and I thought, well, I can't carry that at home, but if I find him, I'll say, you bring it out to my place. They're just big and cumbersome. But if that same capacity was in the form of a capacitor, it could be much lighter. Now, the December issue of Popular Science, and I happened to stop by a library, I think it was yesterday, and I says, I gotta look, maybe that Popular Science copy is still here. I was trying to find where they were talking about a material that's very, very lightweight, lighter than air. And I thought, oh, sure.
Huh.
But I got to see what they have to say.
Is it some kind of new nanomaterial they developed or something like that? Or?
Yeah, but when they say lighter than air, I'm very familiar with anything there is to know about air. I studied or worked with or whatever over the years.
Well,
so they got to show me. But if it's lighter, I'm very interested. Mm-hmm. Now, my capacitor knowledge is when I would tune up cars or work in aircraft or whatever it may be, and they would talk about your condenser and a distributor. Okay, that little condenser is a capacitor. Oh, really?
Well, what is a capacitor exactly?
Okay, if we had in the car in a distributor, it's about the diameter of my thumb. And if we used to take a hacksaw and cut that down, we'd see a piece of metal, piece of cardboard, piece of metal, piece of cardboard, and you can go on and make it bigger, but generally it's about 3-4 pieces.
So it's metal that conducts electricity and then a layer of insulation.
You feed electricity into it, and it'll absorb it, and it'll hold it for a bit and release it, but there is designed to happen
when
real quick.
When it releases it, it's jumping from one layer of metal to the next through the insulation?
It can go through.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Now, when we get into big capacitors, I remember back when TVs was first being available to we farmers.
Yeah.
And
where did you live when television first came out?
In Michigan.
Michigan.
I remember when I put up the antenna, it was close to zero outside, and that wasn't going to stop me. This was really something, putting the antenna up. We got a television.
Right.
But our television was a used one, and we had a guy in our church that knew how to fix TVs, so it didn't take too long to find out that, oh, it needs a repair. Okay, so we take it over to our friend, and he's cautioning me. He says, now, when he knows I fix almost anything, even as a young man, and he cautioned me. He says, you never want to reach in here, He says, the capacitor has got enough electricity it could kill you. And I says, I've heard that. And I said, but this one's been sitting for maybe 6 months, our other one, or whatever. And he says, oh, you think it won't hold electricity? And I thought, I got to see that. So he takes a piece of metal and he said, that was enough electricity coming out of there to kill you. And I said, I'll take your word for it.
It made an arc?
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
from the back of the TV.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
See? So I couldn't get that out of my mind over the years as I would think in
The
terms,
idea that a capacitor can store electricity.
yeah, but it's a capacitor much bigger than the little one you have in the distributor
Yeah,
of a
yeah.
car.
Okay.
You know, yeah. It's I don't know. I never did have one in my hand.
Right.
And I was telling a TV repairman here a year or two ago. I says, if you ever get a capacitor, don't throw it away. I want to look at that. I want to study it. I want to see how much it weighs or how much electricity. The ratio here is if I have a capacitor that big, how much electricity can I store there? Okay.
Right.
If that's just an ordinary battery, I already know how much electricity I can store, but it's a lot of weight. See, so I'm trying to encourage people out there, especially people who may have time and they've got some college background, to study the field of capacitors and see really what might be done.
Did you hear that, Smarty Pants college kids? Read about capacitors.
But in the Popular Science magazine there, and I'm going to really look into that, the material they're talking about, the so light, they said it would be ideal for capacitors. I won't sleep well until I come to understand just, you know, are we talking about 100 times an improvement? Or only maybe twice as light for the same amount of electricity? I don't know.
So, what you're talking about here is the ratio between the weight and then how much electricity it can.
Well, okay, let me give you an example. Here comes an electric car, okay. In the back of that Toyota, it's got a whole bunch of batteries, right?
Okay.
And if you go to push that car, you'll find out how it's heavy.
It's very heavy.
It's not light.
Yeah.
Okay, what if I had that lightweight material that could hold electricity identical to what that Toyota Prius is holding? And you come over there and out of curiosity say, I want to push that around the lot. Oh my gosh, that push is easy. Yeah, it's 2,000 pounds less. Really? Wow.
Well, then the Prius would be more efficient because the same amount of energy generated and it's a lighter vehicle.
Lighter, yeah. And I've been giving thought to, I've been involved in the field of aviation for about 55 years.
Let's talk about that some.
And I've been looking at the possibilities of the capacitors there for electric drive systems, because you don't want an ordinary electric motor as we know them to be. They're very heavy.
Yeah.
Electric motors, okay?
Yeah, yeah.
But if you got capacitors that are lightweight and you can have the ability to store maybe as much as 20 batteries, where you might be able to go to LA and back without having to recharge them, that's something really worth looking into.
That would be worth looking into. So Ray, you said you worked in aviation. You've designed airplanes?
Well, I was involved in aircraft development at times, like the F-18 when Northrop had the contract to do. There were two people involved. McDonnell Douglas won the contract, and we were the prime subcontractor.
Okay.
And I happened to come along from an ad in the paper. I didn't even know it was Northrop, you know. And the guy instructs me. He says, "Just go to this address over there at such and such a time." And I come there and I says, Northrop, of all people.
Right.
So I went in there and got hired right away. And I really didn't have
Was
much.
that your first job in aviation?
Oh, no.
No,
I was already a pilot and been working on aircraft. I had my own little Piper Cub in high school. They were very small, little tandem axle. 10 seat, front and back, you know.
Okay.
They're very lightweight and inexpensive.
Okay.
And they used a lot of them during the war for training people.
Oh, wow.
And mine was in 1940, the year I was born. And the two guys that owned it, one of them says, you think Ray might be interested in buying my half out? And the other guy says, I don't know, I'll ask him. I'm just putting in the work here, showing him what we do, fixing these airplanes. And so I had that little Piper Cub. And that started me out, you know, low cost, easy to afford. My half cost me, and it was all rebuilt, $550. Today that airplane's worth, you know, a lot more than that, like $30,000. But it's worth more because a Piper Cub, everybody's heard about that. If I say I got a Luscombe, well, we're talking about airplanes. Yeah, that's an airplane. Well, I've never heard of that. But Piper Cub, everybody's heard about it.
I see.
So that keeps the value up higher,
There's a
right?
higher market value.
You
Right.
know?
Name recognition. So what you did, aircraft design, did you go to college for engineering?
I was a forever student, raising a family and working, carry a class at a time. And when I got here on the West Coast, the second time when I had a family, of course, brought them with me, it was a little bit different there. And I says, I'm going to carry a heavier load because I don't have to drive 40 miles one way to take my class, as I did in Michigan, when from the farm to the nearest college.
Okay.
And anyways, I would carry maybe a half a load, and I thought, oh, that's quite a load. And at one point, I went so far as to go full-time and work full-time, until it almost killed me in a few things that had happened. And I says, okay, I got to drop back, because you got to have your sleep.
Yeah.
I never was good at staying awake when I'm tired. My body, even if I'm driving, if it's time to sleep, I will fall asleep.
Yeah.
So I had to just
Good to
extend
not
it
have that
longer.
happen while you're behind the wheel.
I had to extend it longer and say, okay, one class at a time, and then I'll get my sleep, and. But being that I was doing so much studying on my own, there wasn't too much that I needed to learn in college that I didn't already know. As far as if you were going to get into one of the aviation schools, that's their whole game is, pilot training, mechanic training, and that, and you come out with different degrees. I was more, the little airplanes that I fly, I want to know how to be able to fix them. And so I was doing that on and off over the years. I also worked for General Motors at the time, and you get a chance to work with similar materials. In the automobile industry, it's steel, mostly.
Yeah.
And in the aircraft industry, back in those days, it was tube and fabric.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and
Because it's lighter.
not that they're real light, but, by comparison, they're pretty light. The chromoly tubing, as one engineer from General Motors, some years later, he was criticizing my aircraft, and I says, no, they're not real flimsy. He said, well, look at all the people they kill. I says, if you saw chromoly tubing, how tough it is, you wouldn't say it's flimsy. He said, well, the fabric. I said, the fabric's just a covering. So the air can flow over, and you've got aerodynamic cleanliness, You don't want things protruding, so you cover it with fabric. Today we do it all metal. Well, we could build a home-built aircraft here. We could buy a kit, and you could build it, and you could make a tube and fabric. It'll work just as well as it did back in the teens and the 20s and the 30s and the 40s.
The laws of physics haven't changed between now and then?
No,
Okay.
no.
Sounds good.
The way the good Lord established that, it stayed that way.
Yeah.
Aerodynamics stayed the way it...
Right. But then you think the airline industry's moved on, and what do people, I don't know, do people still make it?
Well, the
tube and
airline
fabric,
industry,
or hobbyists?
it was a matter of time. They were going to gradually work into advanced composite material. We call that ACMs for short.
Okay.
It was lighter.
Yeah.
It wouldn't corrode. Aluminum will corrode. I was just dealing with some stuff today reminding me how fast these jar lids would corrode. And I said, well, what do you expect? You got salt water there, So anything where you get, and we got aircraft around sea like the Navy, the F-18 we put in the Navy, we had to be very concerned about trying to keep that from corroding. But all these aircraft were aluminum, no longer tube and fabric. See, but when the big airline companies, Europe or in the United States, are looking at aircraft, they're looking at advanced composite materials. The 787 that Boeing's got, I think that's all ACMs. The French, the European group, 5 countries are involved in that, have been for years, making all the big aircraft there. I forget which one it was, when they had advanced composite materials on the vertical stabilizer, they apparently did not put a sensor in there, which I thought I couldn't believe, I just assumed that you got a different material. Time will tell if it's supposed to last like the engineers say, according to test results, this can outdo this, this, and this, and how sure are you? Oh, we're dead sure. Well, then how come we had that crash? How come this one failed? Well, we have to look into that. So when that tail came off, they were coming out of New York City on this one, and the captain sensed something move slightly in the aircraft. I'm quite positive. I used to follow up on a lot of accidents as part of my interest, you know, and because I had to know.
Be able to know how to build better aircraft by knowing what went wrong.
Because as a pilot, I had more than my share of forced landings, and you don't forget that.
I bet.
You're very, very careful from then on, and when they talk about, oh, this is better, this is, well, it remains to be seen. But when that captain suspected something not quite right, you get to know your aircraft, and the slightest sound or feel, if your hands is on the controls, and you say, that wasn't a gust of wind. You know, that may have been your forward flaps that's moving a little bit, and there's something loose. That really gets my attention. And I jumped right to my feet and started talking to the captain immediately. I said, what the hell's going on here? I said, did you hear that? And he says, well, they do that all the time at 737. I says, I'd be looking into that. And he was curious why I was saying that. And I says, when that was all open, I stood up and I looked out the window and I could see all that is dirty in there. I says, when I close up an aircraft, it's almost like it's illegal, but it's not. We wipe everything down real clean. See, if the inspector won't sign it off because it's not clean, then you have to do it, see? But when I seen all that oil, I was very curious. And then I see a little stream of oil come down there. And as a master mechanic and engineer, any oil flowing or dripping, that's got our attention. Or fuel dripping. That's not okay, see? But when this big aircraft had that movement, what it was the vertical stabilizer, which comes up, you know, on the back of the fuselage, and it could be 25 feet high. That one maybe 24, something like that, well up in there. I just happen to remember the Spruce Goose was 27 feet inside. Carpenters would go up there with a ladder. It was that big, you know. But whatever size that was, they should have looked immediately and says, oh my gosh, you know, that's advanced composite material, and the rest of the aircraft's all aluminum. So we needed to be watching that closer. So they need to write it up and put it in for a fix, and then put a sensor right on there. See?
You talking about where the two materials rub against each other?
Well,
or?
see, let's say that this is part of the tail section.
Okay.
And you got that, the vertical, the rudder's mounted on the vertical stabilizer.
Okay.
And before flight, you always have to inspect the hinges. Little airplanes or big airplanes, doesn't matter. Somebody's got to inspect it. And when the captain goes around, all the inspection work has been pretty well done. He just wants to satisfy himself. I mean, he carries a little container sometimes, and he'll reach up and put some fuel. At least they did years ago. I don't know if they do that anymore because the unions seem to try to put a stop to that. But what the captain is doing, making sure that when the guys took a sample of gas out, there was no water in there. And that one guy from the airline, I remember out of Miami, Capital, I'm not sure, Al Maytag owns it, or did own it. Not Al, Art Maytag. Anyways, he used to have a little container and he'd go pour the fuel in there. And they raised heck with him. A safety issue, you know, that could start a fire. And he says, no, I don't want to throw that fuel on the ground. And I remember how he had to tell various people, part of my job is to make sure that this aircraft is going to be ready to go. I know the crew did their part, but I'm going to check the fuel myself. And if he ever finds water in there, we're going to have a meeting.
Right.
There's no water to be left in there. Somebody was supposed to have already done that, see. So anyways, you can't take it light. Whether it's a big company like Boeing or a smaller aircraft manufacturer like Piper or Cessna, you got to take it all serious.
Well, you're going to be way up in the air and
Yeah.
So
you-
you gotta, yeah.
Yeah, you don't
Makes
have much
sense.
choice, and I certainly
Right.
had my share of experience where something broke, and you had no alternative, but, just try to find a place to put it down, and sometimes you gotta put it down to the woods, and that's very, very touchy.
I can imagine that would be a very
Especially at
frightening
night,
situation.
you know? You don't even have time to get scared. I
You don't
mean,
know what you're landing
But,
on.
but,
right.
but your training and your flight experience is always where your mind is going through a bunch of things, say, okay, in the event the engines should quit suddenly, what's the first things I do? And you have a whole pattern.
Mm-hmm.
In a big airplane, you pull out a pattern, you got all kinds of stuff down there, and that's why you got more than one pilot, and you keep going over everything. And if you hear a strange sound, you kind of bring the crew together and say, never heard that before, and if the pilot on your right is saying, I have. And so what was it? Well, it had something to do with one of the controls there that was just getting a little bit sloppy. It was nothing to worry about, but you're still concerned. You make your notes. And now with the computer system, like on the B-1 bomber, we had sensors all over that, and the computer was monitoring everything that was going on in that B-1 bomber.
Mm-hmm.
And it would, you could look at the computer, with the two weapons officers sitting in the back and the two flight officers up in the front.
Mm-hmm.
The computer knew what was going on more than the pilots did.
Right.
See? But the idea is when you get back in the ground, the computer will give you a sheet of paper and it's got all these codes. See, I set up all the codes like in the weapons system, but I wasn't concerned about the fuel system unless it came into the weapons bay, and then my codes would work there too. But the computer had to know, and it made it much easier, whereas 20 years before,
That would give you information about what was going on in,
Oh, yeah.
in the airplane while you were
yeah,
flying it.
it wouldn't miss a thing. You
Yeah.
know, it monitored if there was a vibration.
Mm-hmm.
We had a canard in French, or canard, like a duck, a set of wings on the front.
Okay.
And I saw that little thing, and the first time I saw it, and I says, this is not a joke. I says, with the weight and the speed of this thing, and I can carry 21 nuclear weapons on here, what the hell's that little canard going to do? And he says, oh, that's just a stabilizer. I says, oh, so it's a long fuselage, and it tends to want to move a little bit. They says, exactly. And this will stabilize. Oh, that makes sense. Okay. We're learning something every day. You know?
Yeah, you sure do. And in fact, this has been very informative. I think we all learned a lot about engineering and aircraft just from listening to this. I'm going to close this out with a question completely from left field. What's your favorite animal, Ray?
Well, probably should have been a horse, because my dad was a master with horses. And we farmed with horses until we had tractors, after World War II.
Okay.
And I was fortunate enough to have a horse from Will Rogers' farm, Dolly. She was
Oh,
a
wow.
famous horse.
Oh, very cool.
But my doctor that had it, when he found out that my dad had bought the farm, about 90 miles away from where I was born.
Do you mean he bought the farm, or he bought the farm?
Well, we were going to move on the
actually
farm.
purchased a
Yeah,
farm.
with kids, we were going to
Okay.
move to the farm.
He was still
yeah.
alive.
We were,
All right.
yeah. And anyways, Doc says, oh, gosh, Leo, Ray's going to need Dolly. He says, Doc, we can't afford that. And he says, don't worry about that. We were always going out to this farm doing things for him, And so he made Dolly available. She was Western Broke, a fantastic horse.
Oh, wow.
I could outrun anybody.
Yeah.
I was 7 years old. Maybe too young to be on a horse. And I would always win the race. I shouldn't call it a race, but you get into a gallop, and the horse my dad was riding was not a Western Broke riding horse. It couldn't go as fast as Dolly could, but she was old. And she knew, because I was young, enough to try to protect me. And I could never forget that. We come up to the buildings, and my dad was behind. He was hollering out, "Slim, slow down!" And the horse was in full gallop. We came into the yard, and then the horse started slowing down before I was pulling back on the reins enough. And the saddle turned a little bit, and I thought, oh, what does that mean? And off I went into a little tool shed that used to be an outhouse. And I never have returned to normal since that crash. I hit it really hard.
Oh man.
Yeah, almost head first.
You got
No
traumatized by
helmet,
that.
you know.
Wow. Jeez.
So it kind of scared me, and my dad was hoping that I would become a master with horses, I'm sure, because he was always buying horses that people, maybe they were very valuable horses if they were fed right and trained right. And sooner or later, it seemed like every couple of months he'd be picking up a horse, and he'd get so, he could just talk to that horse and he'd have to do anything. He was just a master with him.
Yeah.
But I worked with him, and I would help break him in and all that, you know. Never had an accident after that. I was very, very careful. So probably I should have stayed with the horses more, but just from time to time when somebody would say, have you heard about such and such a horse? I'd say, no. This is, jump on that, tell us what you think. And a time or two, that kind of scared me. I thought, this speed, you know, I don't want to fall again.
So you'll forfeit the horses, but you'll get an airplane.
Well, we still had horses on the farm.
Okay.
And I'd be around them all the time, but dogs was important to me. I had a pet raccoon.
Oh wow!
Even had him in the parade. Had
What
him
was that like?
trained.
I didn't know you could have raccoons as pets. I thought they were too aggressive.
And we never worried about a raccoon having rabies in those days. Today you do.
Yeah.
So dogs and cats and a whole lot of animals and goats. Goats were playful.
Interesting. Yeah.
Wherever I would go in the hay mow, the goats would watch me, and the raccoon, of course, he'd go up, walk up behind me, and which was okay, you know.
So you had a veritable menagerie of animals.
Oh, yeah.
Is what you're saying.
Yeah.
All right. So
And
that's.
then you'd have to go get the cows.
But do you like the horses the best? You think?
If I hadn't had that accident, I probably would have been a
Still
horseman.
riding horses. Yeah.
See? But when I got on some fast horses after that, I mean, they were fast. And I thought, gee whiz, it just, you know, that fear goes into you.
Absolutely.
It's
Absolutely.
just, it
After a
stays
major
with you.
event like
And that's
that,
the way
yeah.
it should work for us, you know. That was a warning. Don't make the same mistake again.
Right. Yeah, you might hurt yourself.
So,
All right. Well, hey, thanks for being on the show, Ray.
you're welcome.
This is great talking to you.
My pleasure.
And yeah, you're watching the Magic Box Talk Show. We're at the Fun City store. We're on Front Street here in Santa Cruz. You can get all kinds of things here. Come on down to the store and tell the people behind the counter that you heard about it on YouTube on the Magic Box, and then I get kudos for that. So that helps me. Okay? So do that. All right. Thanks for everyone. Okay.
I guess I better sit over here.